Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another edition to the Point Podcast. Hope everybody's doing well. It's been a two-day hiatus from podcasts. Just being honest here and open with everybody. I was supposed to be doing one tomorrow, but life got in the way, and we're gonna be doing a lot of content today. Recording this morning, I'm gonna start a series of podcasts where I talk about the divisions in the NFL, and that's what we're gonna be talking about today. With the AFC South to start. But also today, I'm going to be doing an NHL playoff preview show with Casey Ward. That's coming up later this morning. So we'll talk about all the different matchups, who we see winning, the true contenders and pretenders in the playoffs. And we'll give Casey to give some predictions, and we'll dive into that for sure. Also going to be talking about the week in sports so far. A lot of interesting stories with Jack Eichel and the firing of David Quinn, and does Jared Gallant get a job? Where does John Tortorella go? Does Jack Eichel get traded? And the drama in Buffalo. So lots happening, including a great start to the Byron Nelson by Jordan Spieth yesterday, shooting 9 under. So 2 to 3 podcasts this week, couple dropping today, one tomorrow. So lots of content as we head into hopefully a very nice weekend where we get the playoffs going. We got the Byron Nelson for the PGA Championship next week, and it's the last weekend of the NBA season as well as we head into the playoffs and the play-in tournament that begins on Tuesday. But today we're talking football, and it's weird because it's May, but it's actually a big week in the NFL, and the schedule is released. We're talking about that in a podcast too, but I'm gonna be doing a series of podcasts where I break down the divisions. I talk about the draft, talk about free agency, what teams have done to improve, and who I see winning these divisions right now. Now, obviously, this is subject to change. Like in any sport, we're in May. There's still mini camp. There's still training camp, preseason games. And this is going to be the biggest NFL season of all time. Not maybe because of who's going to win it, but it's 17 games. Never been done. That's a new addition to this NFL season. There's 18 weeks in the season. The schedule was released for the second straight year. There are games on Christmas Day. I'm sure the NBA is not real excited about that. It used to be their day, not anymore. So we're going to start with the AFC South. And I started with the AFC South because normally it doesn't get a lot of attention. You see an AFC South game about week 3, week 4 in the NFL season. They're thrown on Thursday Night Football and nobody cares. Well, I think there's some intrigue in this division this year for a number of reasons, good and bad. And I'll get into that. And I'm going to start with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And they went last year, they went 1-15. Obviously a disastrous season. They actually they won their first game of the season against Indy on the road. So huge upset. Then they lose 15 in a row. They go through Jack Luton. They go through Gardner Minshew. They did have some good productivity throughout the year with new players. But obviously a disastrous year, and it was a full-on tank where the Jets actually won in week 14, week 15. They missed out on Trevor Lawrence. We'll get into that. So what does Jacksonville do? Obviously, you have the first overall pick. But before you get to that pick, they decide to fire Doug Marrone. He'd been there 4 years. He'd been to the playoffs twice. But after a 1-15 season in the NFL, you're not keeping a job. So they go out, and it's an interesting search. A lot of good candidates available. They decide to go outside the box thinking. They hire a rookie head coach. Now, the rookie head coach obviously is experienced, but they hire Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer, for people that don't know, is one of the best college football coaches of all time. Now, he's not Bear Bryant. He's not Nick Saban, but he's won everywhere he's won. He won at Utah. He won 2 national championships with Florida. He won a national championship with Ohio State in 2014. And he's built a pedigree. He left in 2018. Then he went to work for Fox as an analyst, and I think he was pretty good at that, and I'm sure he enjoyed it. But Jacksonville came up. And for whatever reason, he liked the job. And I think a big reason why he took the job, the number one reason he took the job, is because they had the first overall pick. And with that first overall pick in the NFL, 9 times out of 10, you're taking a quarterback. And who do they take? The stud. The guy who was going to go first overall since he came in to college football. And that would be Trevor Lawrence from Clemson. Trevor Lawrence, his story is well told. He started his career as a backup quarterback to Kelly Bryant. He took the job very quickly after 4 games, ran with it. His freshman season, they go all the way to the national championship. They win it. Next season, he has a little less than stellar season, threw 10 interceptions, but he's still got that pedigree. He's still got the look, the hair. He's still a great quarterback. And they make it all the way to the national championship again, but they get beat by Joe Burrow and the buzzsaw that was the LSU Tigers. No fault there. LSU was just a better team. Joe Burrow had the greatest season by a quarterback in college football history, in my opinion. So, no skin off your back on that one. Then last year, it was another year where this past year, as everybody knows in your life, COVID fucks with you. Trevor Lawrence got COVID, missed a few games, played here and there a little inconsistently. They get to the college football semifinal, and they get beaten pretty bad by The Ohio State University, where Justin Fields, the number 11 overall pick in the draft, outplayed Trevor. But they get beaten. He decides he's going to go to the NFL, leaves Clemson. He was a Jacksonville Jaguar as soon as they finished last. The pick was made in September. So Urban Meyer, first-year head coach, sure, of course. You get your rookie quarterback. You get a guy that's set. You can nurture him. He's coming in with a college mindset. And I think this works better for Urban. It gives him a better chance of success. Because if he comes into the NFL and he's got an established veteran, and you're going to treat him like you treat college players, which there's a big difference for people that don't know. There is, because in college, you're still green. You're going to listen. I mean, you still listen to your coaches in the NFL, but if you've been around the block, bullshit from, when there's coaching, and when it's, okay, you're just doing this to lecture me. I'm not taking this anymore. And you're going to treat Trevor Lawrence a lot differently than you would Tom Brady. Maybe at the end of the career, maybe not. But right now, he's going to listen more attentively and give you more of a time of day as a rookie head coach in the NFL than Tom Brady would give Urban Meyer. So he gets a college quarterback. That's what he's always been good at. And he hasn't had great college quarterbacks. I mean, he won a national championship with JT Barrett at Ohio State. He won 2 national championships with Tim Tebow. So it's not like he's had great quarterbacks. Trevor Lawrence is bar none the best quarterback he's ever coached, and we'll see what he can do with it. Now, in the draft, what did they do also? They have the first pick, they have the 25th pick. They draft Travis Etienne, also out of Clemson. Now, I think Etienne is going to be a very good NFL player. He was a very good college football player. Real great running back. He's a guy who can have big plays. I think he's a better catcher of the football than a pure runner. But the pick, it may be a bit wary because they have a 1,000-yard rusher. I mean, they went 1-15 last year. You don't have a lot of positives. But one thing you do have is you have James Robinson. He rushed for 1,000 yards in 14 games. He had no expectations. He's a 4th-round pick. Comes in, has a fantastic season. And you could say those yards are empty calories because you go 1-15. But, he didn't have a great offensive line in front of him. Not like he had a great quarterback that was going to throw the ball over the yard. He had a great season. So you have a strength at running back. They also signed Carlos Hyde, who's been a productive backup running back in Seattle and Cleveland. He's bounced around, and you draft a running back in the 1st round. So that doesn't make much sense to me. I think it's going to create problems because how many snaps is Etienne going to play? How many snaps is Robinson going to play? How many snaps is Hyde going to play? You already have people bunched up. Robinson is the RB1 to me. It only makes sense. You have a guy rush for 1,000 yards, but that's what you need. That's your guy. You're not replacing a 1,000-yard rusher with a rookie who I don't even know if he has the capability to run for 500. I think Etienne can be a good special teams player. I think he's a 3rd down back where you can throw him the ball out of the backfield. But ultimately, this pick might have been a Trevor Lawrence one where you say, let's make our new star quarterback happy. Let's bring in his buddy from Clemson. But I don't love the first pick from Urban Meyer. That was my first time where I said, okay, what the hell is he doing here? Some other positives that Jacksonville has right off the bat. They have Cameron Robinson, who was a fourth overall 4 years ago, left tackle. He's a great left tackle. They just franchise tagged him, so they'll be able to keep him on their roster, hopefully work out a long-term deal. But the most important aspects to an NFL team, obviously, it starts with a quarterback. If you don't have a quarterback, you're done. It's like goaltending in the NHL. If you don't have it, you might as well not even lace them up. 2, you need a good left tackle. You need to protect your quarterback's blind side. If you've seen the movie The Blind Side, Michael Orr, his story, it's 100% true. Lawrence Taylor ended Joe Theismann's career because the left tackle could not contain him. And did you watch this year's Super Bowl? Patrick Mahomes ran for his life a lot of times because the left tackle, Mike Remmers, could not do anything about the pass rush from Shaq Barrett, Devin White, and Ndamukong Suh, you name it, from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. If you don't have a left tackle, your quarterback isn't as valuable because that's what he's running for his life and he's got to scramble. He doesn't have time. When quarterbacks have time, they can throw it all over the yard and they're just better players. So huge element of the team, left tackle. They did some little moves. They signed Philip Dorsett. He's a former first-round pick from formerly of the Colts. He's had an up-and-down career. But they do have a good offensive line. They have Andrew Norwell at left guard. They have Brandon Linder. So they have some strengths there. And looking at their receiving core, they do have some promise. DJ Chark Jr., he's a guy who I think can be a 1,000-yard receiver. He was productive with Gardner Minshew. Trevor Lawrence, we can expect him to be better than Gardner Minshew, and I think he'll be better. Laviska Shenault Jr., I think he's got a lot of upside. I think he's a guy that's maybe not going to be a burner down the field, but I think another guy who can get 1,000 yards, even 70 catches, 1,000-yard seasons. I think he's big, he's rangy. I like his game a lot, so he's a guy that has some upside. And they also added Marvin Jones Jr. from Detroit. He's not a number one receiver, but he can play the slot. He can have a big play here and there, and he was good with Matthew Stafford, so that checks out for Jacksonville. Now, before I get to their defense, because I think they got some good things going, and obviously they got some problems because they went 1-15. I mentioned Etienne being the first big problem that I saw from Urban Meyer. Now there's a bigger one, and his name is Tim Tebow. Now, this story. Tim Tebow was a great college football quarterback. Went to Florida, was coached by Urban Meyer, and he won 2 national championships, 2006, 2008. In between that, he won a Heisman Trophy in 2007, and you could make the argument he's one of the top 10 best college quarterbacks of all time. Sure. So he gets drafted 25th overall by the Denver Broncos. He has a run where he gets to the playoffs. He beats the Pittsburgh Steelers on a throw to Demaryius Thomas, where Thomas ran 60 yards, but somehow Tebow gets the credit from that play, which doesn't make any sense to me. But nevertheless, that started Tebow time, where every time he threw a touchdown, he had to kneel down and pray, and it was a circus. But the big thing about Tim Tebow was that he was no good at playing quarterback. He left that after that season. Denver got Peyton Manning. Then he went to the Eagles. He went to the Patriots. He went to the Jets, and he never got a starting job again. The NFL basically told him, you can't play. And they wanted him to play tight end. They wanted him to convert positions, but his ego was too big. Maybe Jesus wouldn't let him. I don't know. But so he says, oh, screw the NFL. It's not my calling. I'm going to go play baseball. Hadn't played baseball in 15 years. But what does he do? Goes, plays baseball, gets to AA, plays 5 years down there, never makes it. Never makes it to the big leagues. So he was no good in the NFL, no good at baseball. So he hasn't played in the NFL at 8.5 years. He's now 33. He's a pretty good college football analyst. I'll give him that. But now it's reported he's going to the Jacksonville Jaguars as a tight end. So he would not convert positions back in the day, but now that he's 33, washed up, and no good at baseball or football, he's going to play tight end for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I have a big problem with this. And there's two words that really come to mind when I think of this, and it's white privilege. And I think of a guy named Colin Kaepernick who couldn't get a job because he was too big of a distraction, because he was taking a knee and speaking out against police brutality, which, this year seemed to be a really big story, and it seemed to be a systemic problem in our culture and in the world, but he can't get a job for doing the right thing. So that was okay. Yeah, we can't give Colin Kaepernick a job. Okay, fine, whatever. So Tim Tebow, who did nothing, couldn't play in the NFL. Colin Kaepernick made it to a Super Bowl. But no, I guarantee you, if Colin Kaepernick wanted to try out as a tight end, he wouldn't get the job. He's got quotes of the Bible over his arms. But guess what? We got the white kid who's 33 and, he's a great angelic and Christian. He's this and that. Let's give him another look. And it's nepotism and white privilege, where there are free agents all over the world that play college football that are cut, looking for jobs, looking for work. And yet you're going to give a 33-year-old guy who hasn't played football in 8.5 years another shot. And I'll be honest, I didn't like Tim Tebow when he was playing quarterback. I hated this stupid knee, and he was taking a knee before Kaepernick. And what's pretty damn divisive? Religion. But no, okay, he didn't get kicked out of the league because he was divisive. He got kicked out of the league because he sucked at what he does. And now it's bringing back now. It's so hypocritical, and I get Urban Meyer coached him. You might feel like you owe him a favor, but I think this is a really bad look where Tim Tebow gets a second chance because he's a great, he's Jesus and this and that, and Colin Kaepernick is just as big as a religious figure, but he can't get a job. In life, in my opinion, if you're good at something, then you should keep a job. If you're bad, you lose it. And in this stance, Colin Kaepernick lost a job. People can hate him for what he did. He made it to a Super Bowl. He made it to multiple Pro Bowls. Tim Tebow stunk. He sucked at baseball. He sucked at football. And yet, no, now he's 33 years old. You think you want to come in and play tight end? People are retiring at 33 playing tight end. Who knows if he can even catch? And if he doesn't make the team, it's still an issue for me because he's taking a roster spot from a kid who just played college football this year that deserves it more than this guy. This guy is such an attention whore. It's crazy. And I get it. The Mets signed him because they knew he's going to be no good at baseball. He's garbage. But they could sell Tim Tebow and their minors and jersey sales. I'm sure Jacksonville's thinking the same thing. But I just think the hypocrisy is crazy here. Where Jacksonville, you have Trevor Lawrence, you have Urban Meyer. Why do you need this Tim Tebow coming in? But maybe he'll be great. And even if he is great, I still disagree with it because principle. And I'm sure there's tons of people that love Tim Tebow, that love the whole going down on one knee and the whole Jesus shtick. And yeah, I'm not a big religious guy, so maybe that's my bias there. But he's one of the most polarizing athletes in the world for sure, because I've never seen such a bad athlete get more opportunities than this guy. So I mentioned two things already with Urban Meyer. The Etienne pick, signing Tim Tebow. Two real questionable decisions where I go, is this guy going to be successful? Successful at college, that does not mean you're going to be successful in the NFL. Chip Kelly was really good in college, terrible in the NFL. Nick Saban is the best college football coach ever. He barely lasted a year in Miami. So Jimmy Johnson, Pete Carroll, but we'll see where Urban Meyer falls in the hierarchy of college coaches pivoting to the NFL. Now, moving on from that sideshow, that is Tim Tebow. Jacksonville's defense definitely could use some work. They drafted Josh Allen, defensive end, 5th overall 2 years ago. He's been a disappointment, inconsistent. He's only got 5.5 sacks in 57 career games, so clearly not a great pass rusher. They have a young decor with CJ Henderson at corner. Chason, another pass rusher from LSU. He's been inconsistent. They do have Miles Jack and Joe Schobert, who are both veteran linebackers who are the kind of the building blocks of this team. They signed Shaq Griffin from Seattle, who's been a Pro Bowl corner. So we'll see if he can travel going from the NFC to AFC. So we'll see what happens with him. But obviously this team went 1-15, so they got some work to do. I don't expect they'll be great this year. The Cincinnati Bengals were not great last year. But the one thing I can say about Jacksonville, I think they'll be better than 1-15. That's not saying much. But they have an offensive line to protect Trevor Lawrence. If I look at Joe Burrow with Cincinnati, they didn't. And he got injured. The biggest thing you can hope for is Trevor Lawrence learns the system, gets familiar with the NFL. He's going to have some growing pains. Peyton Manning famously led the NFL in interceptions in his rookie season. Still holds up to this day for most interceptions in a season. But they let him work through it. And if you can protect him and he learns, and maybe you win 4 or 5 games this year and you go 5-12, that it's bad on paper, but at least you got your quarterback play a full season. He's healthy, and you go into the next season, you get another high draft pick, and you hopefully can start improving your roster and get better year over year. So I don't expect Jacksonville to be great. I don't expect them to fight for the division crown, but it'll be an interesting season for Trevor Lawrence, first year for Urban Meyer, and see how that all progresses. Houston Texans, another team from this division that was terrible last year. They went 3-13, even though they had Deshaun Watson, who led the NFL in passing yards, was second in passing touchdowns. And that just proves you can have an elite quarterback, but you do need pieces around him. And they've been a team that's self-destructing. They traded for Kenny Stills and Laramie Tunsil from the Miami Dolphins a year and a half ago. They did get to the AFC Championship game, but this past year, Tunsil was inconsistent. Again, Kenny Stills was released. And that pick ultimately turned out to be the 3rd overall pick in the draft, which Miami then traded to San Francisco. That ended up being the 6th pick, where they took the wide receiver out of Alabama. So Houston, they got some problems. They traded away DeAndre Hopkins. They released J.J. Watt. They released Jadeveon Clowney. So they're in a state of transition here where they've been a perennial playoff team, but they're definitely on the move. They're on the downward slope. And it started at quarterback. Beginning of the offseason, Deshaun Watson came out and said, I'm done with Houston. I want out of here. I want to be traded. And Houston has been steadfast. We're not trading Deshaun Watson. We just signed him to an extension. We love him here. But he's said from the beginning, I'm not coming back here. No interest in me coming back to the Houston Texans. So they're locked in there. But then, problems came with Deshaun Watson, where allegations came out from women saying that when he was getting massages from them, he was inappropriate. He sexually assaulted them. And there's a lot of civil cases right now that are being worked out. There's been over 20 women come out and speak out against Deshaun Watson. So there's been no proof yet, but in over 20 cases, it's clearly a serious matter. And at the very least, I think he'll be suspended. Just for point of reference, a number of years ago, Ben Roethlisberger was accused of sexual assault by 2 different women, and none of it came out, but he was still suspended by the NFL 4 games. He was originally 6, dropped to 4. So looking at that precedent with 20 cases, you got to suspect Deshaun Watson will get at least suspended 4 games, but with the number of cases, I think you got to go higher than that. So we'll say 6 to 8 games, maybe miss half the season this year. So Houston's sitting there with Deshaun Watson. He doesn't want to return, but it's been eerily quiet on his status with the team. I don't know if teams still want to trade for him. I'm sure they do. I mean, he's an elite quarterback, one of the best in the NFL, like top 3. But if he's not going to play half the year, I think if you're a team, you still take him. Unless these cases are serious. If they could become criminal, well, then he could go to jail, and he should if the allegations are true. Now, if it's civil and they're working on a settlement, which Mike Florio reported this week from Pro Football Talk, that they're working on a settlement and that, obviously paying the women out, then that's a different story. Then the NFL will likely still suspend him, but he'll be eligible to return likely at some point next season. And if he does not want to return to Houston, then I'm sure there'll be teams interested. I think the Miami Dolphins would kick tires on him. I suspect the Washington football team would take a look. They're looking for a long-term answer quarterback. So I think a number of teams would definitely be looking. But there's that confusion. Week 1, I'd be shocked if Deshaun Watson was starting quarterback for the Houston Texans for the reasons I just mentioned. So what do? They signed in free agency Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod Taylor's been an average starter to above average backup quarterback in the NFL. His career started with Baltimore, where he was the backup of Joe Flacco. He was there for 4 years, then left to become the starting quarterback with Buffalo. He was there for a while, got them back to the playoffs for the first time in over a decade, but was then let go when they drafted Josh Allen. He went over to Cleveland, where he was another stopgap quarterback before they drafted Baker Mayfield. He became the starter. And then it happened to him again last year where he was a starter. He got injured. Justin Herbert got to play for the Chargers, and he never saw the field again. So he's a fringe guy. And Houston went 3-13 last year. They're going to be bad again this year, really bad. And he's a guy that can take snaps. I think he's a veteran. He's earned respect in the league. So you at least have that. You got some credibility in a guy that I think the guys in the locker room will like. And he's not a terrible quarterback. He's not great. But he'll keep you competitive, but likely keep Houston in the bottom half of the league, and you'll get a high draft pick. They also drafted Davis Mills from Stanford, the first pick of the 3rd round. He did not play last year. He opted out because of the draft, wanted to be ready. He could be the long-term answer. He's a guy that Mel Kiper and Todd McShay had a high draft on. Obviously, there's 5 quarterbacks taken in the first round, but he was rated the highest after those 5. So we'll see what he brings to the table if he plays this year. I wouldn't be surprised if he does. Tyrod Taylor does have an injury history. And if you're Houston, why not take a look at your asset? You have a 3rd round pick. You know what Tyrod Taylor is. His ceiling is there. Davis Mills, see what he's got. And then, like I said, you're going to picking high. So if Davis Mills could be your answer, then potentially you could trade out of a high pick. You could make another selection. So there's options there. So that's really their quarterback room right now. In the offseason, they also lost Will Fuller. He walked. He went to the Miami Dolphins. He was one of Deshaun Watson's favorite targets for the last number of years. Real end zone threat. So that happened. Then he also released tight end Darren Fells, who was there a long time. So they still have Brandon Cooks, who said he didn't want to be moved from Houston. He's been on 5 teams in 7 years. They have Randall Cobb, the former Cowboy and Green Bay receiver, who's on the bottom end of his career. They signed Chris Conley from Jacksonville, Dante Moncrief from Indianapolis. But the biggest thing that this team has is they still have Laramie Tunsil. They have Max Sharping. They have Justin Britt. They have Marcus Cannon on their O-line. It's a solid offensive line, but this team is not going to be good. Like I said, their defense, it's full of veterans that are long in the tooth, to say the least. It was bottom 5 in the NFL last season. I suspect it'll be bottom 5 again. You lose J.J. Watt. You do not have an elite pass rusher. I mean, Houston did not have a pick until the 3rd round, and they selected a quarterback. So it tells you, they've been trading away picks, hoping to win a Super Bowl. Now the organization's in disarray, where Deshaun Watson, who wanted out, J.J. Watt asked for his release. So it's been taking a lot of negative press lately. The whole Houston sports scene, where James Harden left the Houston Rockets. You have the Houston Texans. You have the Astros with the whole cheating scandal. So the Houston sports market's really been getting beaten up lately. But again, the Texans and Jaguars could be battling for potentially the top spot in the draft. I think right now the Jacksonville's in a better spot because you have Trevor Lawrence, you suspect he'll be better than Davis Mills or Tyrod Taylor. You got a good running back. Houston does not have that stability at running back. They don't have a guy that where you say, okay, who are we going to go to on this specific play? They don't have that luxury right now. They don't have elite receiving core. I think this team, the best case scenario, you've been trading away picks. You only had a third and sixth rounder in this year's draft. Deshaun Watson, if he comes back, he's suspended a few games. If you can convince him to come back, great, because he's a great option. I doubt he will. So what you got to do is trade him and get what you can for him, because get a good haul, get some good pieces in return, because it's going to be hard to replace him. I don't care what quarterback is at the top of the draft. When he's healthy, he's one of the best. He's an elite quarterback, one top 5 at the very least in the league. So get what you can for him. Get a top 5 pick in this year's draft, potentially number 1, and get your quarterback of the future. Start to retool and be the Jacksonville of this season next year, where you start to turn it around, get some pieces to help him, and hopefully your organization is in a better light where free agents will be excited to go to Houston, where right now I think they're a little guarded because of Deshaun Watson saying things with the organization, J.J. Watt leaving after, just loving his time in Houston forever. Didn't seem like it was a great breakup at the end of it. So Houston, definitely they need a rehabilitation here to see what they can do to really make it a good spot for players to be again. Let me just do these two next teams, and both these two teams to finish off this division were playoff teams. And we'll start with the Indianapolis Colts. Indianapolis last year had Phillip Rivers at quarterback. They signed him from the Chargers to a 1-year deal. He came over. They did not win the division, but they made the playoffs as a wild card. And they had some really positive things happen. Phillip Rivers was a solid quarterback. They drafted Jonathan Taylor from Wisconsin. He had a really slow start to the year. Ended up running for over 1,000 yards. Back half of the season, he was a lead horse at running back, where he looked like, a Derrick Henry, where he was a power guy. He's starting to learn how to catch the ball in the backfield. I think he's got a ton of promise. But, running for over 1,100 yards in a rookie season is impressive. And I still think he's got more to his game. I mentioned his receiving game. If you can get a quarterback who's better at doing that, I like him. But you look at their depth. They got Nakeem Hines, who isn't going to be a 1,000-yard rusher, but he's a third down back who can go out of the backfield. You could also put him in the slot, which they did last year. He's got a ton of skill, a ton of potential. So he's a good option. And they also have Marlon Mack, who was their number 1 running back before Jonathan Taylor. He tore his ACL last year in week 1. So he'll be coming back. They got him on a cheap deal. So you look at their running back room, it's sort of like Jacksonville's, but I think these guys know their role. Taylor's that number 1 running back. They're still working on his ability to catch the ball in the backfield. Hines is going to be out there on third downs. He'll also play the slot. And Marlon Mack is just basically an insurance policy. I think Indianapolis liked them a lot. So they had Phillip Rivers last year. He retired. Great career, 3rd all-time in passing yards, maybe a Hall of Famer. But you look at Indy, they got all the trappings of a Super Bowl team. They have a great offensive line, where you got left guard Quentin Nelson, who is going to go to the Hall of Fame one day. He's that good. You got Ryan Kelly, who's he's a perennial Pro Bowl center. You have Mike Lewinsky, who's another guy who's fantastic. They had Anthony Costanzo, who was a great left tackle. He retired. He's had some injuries, so that was a hole. But they do go out there and add Eric Fisher, who was with the Chiefs for 8 years. He is coming off a torn Achilles, but again, he was great with the Chiefs, and the Chiefs decided to move on because they wanted to upgrade their O-line. But I like, he's a good add. You lose Costanzo. I mentioned before, you got a left tackle. You try to cover it up, and Fisher, if he's healthy, can be a great one. But you lose Phillip Rivers, you have some great pieces. So you need a quarterback. Like I said, you need a quarterback to win. So what did they do? They had Jacoby Brissett. They let him walk. He goes to Miami as a backup quarterback. They go out and trade for Carson Wentz. And Carson Wentz was a distressed asset. He wanted out of Philadelphia. Philadelphia wanted him out of Philadelphia. He was former second overall pick, would have won the MVP in 2017 if he did not tear his ACL in week 14 against the Rams. But last year, he was terrible. He led the league. He got sacked over 50 times last year, was second in interceptions, and he was benched at the end of the year for Jalen Hurts, where Hurts came in and took the job from him. He'll likely be the starting quarterback this year in Philadelphia. But the coach for the Indianapolis Colts is no other than Frank Reich. And in 2017, when Wentz was on his run to becoming the MVP, his offensive coordinator was Frank Reich. That's who he's had his most success with. Frank Reich left after that year after they won the Super Bowl. He got offered the Indy job, and he took it. He's done great things with Indy, getting into the playoffs. They were very close to upsetting the Bills last year with Phillip Rivers at quarterback. So Carson Wentz, does he have his issues? Yeah. I think he holds on to the ball too long. That's one of his big problems. I think he's a little too fragile. I think his mentality was shaken last year because his mental game, where you look at him, he was afraid to get hit, which I can't blame him. He got sacked the most times in the NFL last year. So no shame there. But he's a reclamation project where he was a second overall pick out of North Dakota State, and he's got so much talent, and he should be a great quarterback, and maybe he will be. Again, last year he didn't have a lot of weapons to throw to. I correlated a lot to New England, where Cam Newton looked terrible, but he had nobody to throw the ball to. Julian Edelman was hurt. They had guys converting from quarterback to receiver. That's all he had, and the running game wasn't great either. He's coming here from Philly, where the running game was subpar at best. Again, he's going to have Jonathan Taylor. He's going to have Nakeem Hines. He liked having a running back to throw the ball to. He's got that now. He's also got Michael Pittman Jr. from USC, and he had a great rookie campaign, being a 1,000-yard receiver. I think he's got more upside than that. I think he can get to an even higher plateau with a better quarterback like Carson Wentz. And I like the cut of his jib. He's a confident guy. He can catch. He's got a high catch radius. So we'll see what he can do with Carson Wentz. Zach Pascal, he's a good slot receiver. They brought back T.Y. Hilton, who's their deep threat. I do think they could have. They didn't draft a receiver. They didn't sign one for agency. I think they tried to sign Pittsburgh receiver. Name's not coming to my mind. Juju Smith-Schuster. But they could have added a receiver. They could have added another receiver for me. It was a wide receiver draft that was loaded with them. You look at Rashad Bateman, where they picked in the first round. He was available. They passed on him. He would have been an interesting guy. Terrence Marshall Jr., who fell to the second round out of LSU. But they go back with they have the same receiving core. They got all the same receivers. They got Jack Doyle and Mo Alley Cox as their tight ends. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, they were a playoff team last year. They're strong, and I'm sure they think, well, we have a better quarterback than we did last year, which I can't disagree with. Carson Wentz more active. He can move with the football. He can give you a first down with his legs, which Phillip Rivers could never run. So that brings a different element. And this would be one of the better stories if Carson Wentz can come back and make himself an elite quarterback again, where Philly, they left him for dead. I mean, they traded basically a second-round pick and a conditional first. It'll be a first if he plays 75% of the snaps this year. But it's all on Carson Wentz. It's time. It's put up or shut up time, because this team has the trappings, again, to win a Super Bowl. They drafted Kwity Paye out of Michigan with their first pick. It was 21st overall. So they hope he can be a great pass rusher. They have DeForest Buckner, who they traded for from San Francisco last year. This guy is an all-pro, one of the best guys at getting to the quarterback, putting pressure on the quarterback. So he's a great find. They also got Darius Leonard, who might be he's one of my favorite players to watch in the NFL. Darius Leonard, for me, you got Budda Baker, who's another one of my guys. He can play. Darius Leonard's an all-pro. And 2 all-pros on your defense is not a bad thing to have. And Philly did not have a great defense last year. They haven't in a number of years. Since their Super Bowl, their defense has gone down every year. So has their offensive efficiency. So you got two Pro Bowl players, two All-Pros ready for Carson Wentz. You also got veterans in Kenny Moore and Xavier Rhodes who still know how to play. They're not as fast as they used to be, but they're crafty. They can make things happen. And I look at Indy and say, the AFC is going to be tough this year because teams have improved. Baltimore's gotten better. Kansas City's still there. Buffalo got to an AFC championship game last year. You got Cleveland, who I think have really improved and will be a sleeper Super Bowl team. So it's difficult, but when it comes to winning their division, it's easier because you should sweep Jacksonville. Perfect world, you sweep them. You lost one game to them last year, cost you the division. You lost week 1 against Jacksonville to Gardner Minshew. You win that, you win the division. You should sweep Jacksonville. You should sweep Houston. And the biggest thing that's in the favor of Indy this year, obviously you got a better quarterback. You get a strong team. But Tennessee's gotten worse. Tennessee's won the division the past 2 years. They have progressively gotten worse because they've lost players, and they've lost coaches. So I look at Indianapolis saying, I think they'll win the division this year. I think Tennessee's going to be in a position where they have to fight for a wild card because I just like the Colts roster better. I think Carson Wentz still has to put up or shut up. He's still got a lot to prove what he can do at the NFL level at a high level consistently. But he's got the weapons. He's got the offensive line. Hopefully, again, Eric Fisher is the X factor. When's he going to be available? Is he healthy? But the track record of tackles coming back from an Achilles tear is good. The next year they are normally productive and can protect the quarterback. So we'll see if Eric Fisher can do that for Carson Wentz. But my prediction, I'll mention it again at the end, but I think the Colts will win this division because they are the best team on paper, and I think Tennessee's just gotten worse. So that brings us to our last team, the Tennessee Titans. And Tennessee won the division last year, but they ultimately fell to the Baltimore Ravens in the wildcard game where Derrick Henry couldn't get going. Baltimore shut him down. He couldn't break through. Tannehill made some plays, but Lamar Jackson was just better than both those players on that day, and the Baltimore defensive front was just too chaotic for Tennessee to really establish anything. When you look at the offseason for Tennessee, I mentioned they lost a lot of players. Well, it starts with their offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith. He left Tennessee to become the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, and Tennessee signed Ryan Tannehill, their starting quarterback, as a reclamation project where he was in Miami, first-round pick, looked like a bust under Adam Gase. Now, we should have known better because Adam Gase just ruins every quarterback that's not Peyton Manning. But he goes to Tennessee, sits behind Marcus Mariota for a few games. But 6 games into that season, they replace him with Tannehill. He comes in. He's one of the more efficient quarterbacks in the NFL. They get to the playoffs. They upset the Patriots. They upset the Ravens and lose to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. But Arthur Smith has really designed an offense where Derrick Henry was the focal point. But the other focal point was play action. Because when you have a running game that's so effective, defenses are going to cheat and try to stop the run. And that gives your quarterback an option to run bootlegs, to run play actions, to run end arounds. And they did that so effectively, where Tannehill would just start. He's a mobile, big quarterback, would run with the ball. He'd have open receivers like A.J. Brown on the field, throwing to tight ends like Jonnu Smith and Austin Ferkser. And you can create big plays, big chunk plays because defenses cheat, and it leaves guys wide open. And then when you create those play action, you have to worry about it a bit, and that gives Derrick Henry more options to run. So you lose Arthur Smith. Big loss because he was the one designing those plays. He's now the head coach for Matt Ryan. You lose Jonnu Smith, who is one of the more underrated tight ends in the game. You hear about Travis Kelce. You hear about George Kittle. You hear about Gronk. But Jonnu Smith has a great catch radius. He's not a burner. He's not going to blow by you down the field. But he's got great hands. He was one of Tannehill's favorite targets, especially in the end zone. And he's a big loss because you lose him. You have Ferkser, who was a great number 2, who would make those catches when you needed him to, but he's not Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith is an elite guy, and they didn't add to that in the offseason. They lose their left tackle, Taylor Lewan. He's a guy who's had some problems. He had PD issues a number of years back, was suspended, but he's a tackle that's been really effective in the league. He's gone. So you lose him. They also lose Corey Davis. He was a former first round pick at receiver. He goes to the New York Jets. The Jets offer him a pile of money. He leaves Tennessee. They still have A.J. Brown, who is their best receiver by far, but you lose Jonnu Smith, you lose Corey Davis. It starts to pile up. And all these players so far have been in their offense. I haven't touched their defense yet and what they did. But this is just, you start to see accumulation of players that are leaving, and these are all important players. Left tackle, having a strong tight end in a play action system is paramount because tight ends block for the run game, but also they can catch in bootleg scenarios. So I'll get to what they do have going for them in a minute, but I'm going to pivot to their defense. What do? They were bottom 5 in defense last year in the NFL. Tennessee. They were the first team that were bottom 5 in the NFL and defensive efficiency to make the playoffs. They won their division. They were the 4th seed in the AFC when having a losing record. To make the playoffs. So that's pretty incredible statistic. It's not going to happen again, but clearly they noticed that their defense stunk last year. So what did they do? They cut Adoree Jackson, their corner. He was a former second round pick for them. He's gone. I didn't think he was that bad of a player, but again, they clearly think they can upgrade. They released Kenny Vaccaro, another long-time Titan for them. He's gone. They cut Malcolm Butler, which is probably a good situation because he's a guy who can make interceptions, made a big play for the Patriots in a Super Bowl, but he's a boomer bust corner where he's going to go for the interception. He can break coverage and get the top blown off him. That happened too often for Tennessee last year. So you lose all these players. And they also had the least amount of sacks for a playoff team in the history of the NFL, which they didn't have a pass rush. They signed Jadeveon Clowney. He played 5 games, had 1 sack, former first overall pick. He's now in Cleveland, but he couldn't do anything. He was injured. So they needed pass rush. So what did they do? I'll get to their additions. They added Bud Dupree from Pittsburgh. He had a great season last year. He was having a great season. Then he blew his ACL. And he's a good pass rusher, don't get me wrong, but he's coming off an injury, which can be serious, but he was also playing alongside TJ Watt, where TJ Watt was getting double teams. And you could argue TJ Watt should have been Defensive Player of the Year last year. They give it to Aaron Donald. But Dupree was getting the second tackle. He was getting the second best player guarding him every time. He's not going to get that luxury. He's the best pass rusher on the Titans roster. He's going to be getting double teams. He's going to be getting, so can he be productive? And also, can the secondary guy beat the secondary tackle? Tennessee's got to hope it happens, but I think Bud Dupree's a good player. They gave him a lot of money, a lot of money coming off an injury coming to Tennessee, but they're desperate right now. I think they still have somewhat of a window, but they know they're in a weak division and they need to try to take advantage of this opportunity. They also added Janoris Jenkins, who was a corner in New Orleans the last number of years, was a corner in the Giants before that. And they drafted Caleb Farley in the first round out of Virginia Tech, who had a lot of bugaboos about him. He has had some back problems, but regarded as one of the most talented players in the draft if he can stay healthy. So he can obviously lose 2 corners. They cut 2 corners in for agency. You add one here. You got to hope that Caleb Farley can stay healthy because then you got some good options there. But, I mentioned they're good things. They still got Ryan Tannehill, who's been one of the more consistent quarterbacks in the NFL for the past number of years. Leaving Miami, since then, he's really adopted the role of being second fiddle because he's one of the few quarterbacks in the NFL where he's not the most important player on an offense. The most important player for the Tennessee Titans offense is Derrick Henry, the guy who's run for 1,800 yards and then over 2,000 for the past 2 seasons, where he's been the best running back in the NFL. And to me, it's not even close. You can look at Alvin Kamara, you can look at Christian McCaffrey, but Derrick Henry, is he the best receiver out of the backfield? No, he's not that guy that you look at in today's game where you say he can do both things really well. He will catch the ball, but it's not his strength. His strength is give him the football, and he's going to run down the field and run it down your throat. And he ran for over 2,000 yards in the regular season last year. He had 4 games where he ran for over 200 yards last year. The guy's a human truck. And when you can limit this guy to 100 yards rushing, you've had a good day as a defense. That's just how it works. And teams know it's coming, but yet a lot of teams can't do anything about it. Credit to Baltimore and Wink Martindale, their defensive coordinator, who came up with a scheme to stop Derrick Henry, and Tennessee couldn't figure it out in time. They couldn't adjust, where Henry only ended up, I think, 34 yards for the day on the ground, which is incredible. And credit to that Baltimore defense for limiting him and his ability to break through. But you still have him. You still got him. You got a solid offensive line with Ben Jones and Roger Saffold Jr. You got Austin Ferkser, who's now your number 1 tight end. I think he's way better too. You still got time here before the season starts. Maybe there's a tight end that gets cut that you take a chance on, but I think you need to upgrade that position. They didn't do it in the draft. It wasn't a great tight end draft because after Kyle Pitts, it really did get slim. So I don't blame them for not taking one. But I look at this team and say they're going to get worse because you lose your offensive coordinator, you lose your star left tackle, you lose your starting tight end, you lose your number 2 receiver after A.J. Brown and Corey Davis. You completely redoing your defense on the fly, which sometimes can be good, and it can also be a disaster because you got to learn new scheme, you got to learn new players got to come in and learn the playbook. So that can be problematic. Does Bud Dupree come back from an injury? Can he play the way he did? Janoris Jenkins, he's a number 2 corner. Caleb Farley, can he stay healthy? So still a lot of questions to be answered by Tennessee. And also, they got a tough schedule. The big thing for Tennessee is, can you beat Indy? Because you don't have to be great. But if you do well in your division games, you have a chance. And I mentioned off the top, you got Jacksonville. They went 1-15 last year. I believe they'll be better, but not much better. 4 or 5 wins max. So beat them. You gotta sweep them. You got Houston. You gotta sweep them. They're gonna be worse. I think they have the potential of being Jacksonville this year, where they're 1-15. They could swap. I think again they went 3-13 last year. They'll be worse than that this year. They'll be the same, if not worse, because they went 3-13 with Deshaun Watson, a top 5 quarterback in this league. It tells you everything you need to know about the state of the Houston Texans franchise. Again, Indy, they've gotten better in my eyes. They've done a lot of really good things. They were good with Phillip Rivers. I think they would have been comfortable with him coming back to this team. They didn't make a whole bunch of additions. They still have basically a similar roster, but with Carson Wentz. Again, Carson Wentz has more upside than Phillip Rivers. He's got a better arm than Phillip Rivers. He's more athletic than Phillip Rivers. And he's back with Frank Reich. Can he find the magic of 2017 where he was the MVP before blowing his knee out? Who knows? But he's got a better offensive line than he does in Philly. He's got a better running attack than he does in Philly. And he's got Pro Bowlers on the defensive side. The only guy he could trust on the defensive side in Philly was Fletcher Cox, who's likely going to the Hall of Fame. Other than that, you had nobody that you trusted back. The corners stunk. The other pass rushers, less than ideal. Your offensive line had Jason Peters, who should have retired after the Super Bowl. He's been hanging around too long. And Wentz was getting killed. But he's got to learn to throw the ball away. We see Aaron Rodgers. We see Tom Brady. These guys, they see the pocket collapse. They throw the ball away. Yeah, it's kind of a pansy-ass move, but guess what? Your body's okay. You don't flinch every time somebody breaks through the line, and you keep playing. You live to play another down, so to speak, in NFL terms. Carson Wentz needs to find that, and Frank Reich needs to instill that in him, because keeping the ball too long and taking a big hit or not sliding and being the hero on the bench, it might work once or twice, but that third or fourth time, it's going to knock you out of a game. Robert Griffin III did that. Guess what? The guy got injured for 3 straight years, and now he's a free agent looking for a job. And he was playing at Baylor, coming in to the Washington football team. He looked like a superhero. He looked like the next Lamar Jackson, except he didn't know how to slide. He didn't know how to avoid contact, which is the easiest as it's ever been right now for quarterbacks because the officials protect them more than any other position. And then you look at Tennessee, their best. You got to hope that Derrick Henry can continue his pace. He's got to run for close to 2,000 again. Tannehill's got to limit the interceptions, which he's done the past couple of years, and hope that A.J. Brown, who had 1,500 yards receiving last year, you got to hope he can stay healthy. He can continue to play because he doesn't have Corey Davis. He doesn't have Johnny Smith. So he's likely going to be double, triple team. Who's going to step up and take some of those receptions? Who's going to do that for Tennessee? Can the offensive line hold up in front of Tannehill, but also can it run block? Can it be effective for Derrick Henry? And those are the big things we'll see here in the AFC South. But looking at it, I think the Colts win the division. Tennessee obviously will come in second. I think they can push for a wild card spot. The AFC East can be tough because you have teams like the Patriots who have gotten better. The Dolphins obviously finishing 10-6 last year. They got playoff aspirations. And you still have the Bills. You got Cleveland, Baltimore, Pittsburgh's not going to go away in Big Ben's last season. And then you got the Raiders, the Chargers potentially could be better with Justin Herbert in his sophomore season. So I think it's going to be a dogfight for a team from the AFC South. I think it's likely one team from the AFC South will make the playoffs, and I believe that will be the Indianapolis Colts. So we'll see what happens, but the real interesting thing for me is how does Carson Wentz look in the Indy uniform? How does he play? And then Deshaun Watson, obviously that fallout, and just for Urban Meyer and Trevor Lawrence, how does that go? Are they on HBO Hard Knocks where they get followed with cameras? And did they do that just to have Tim Tebow join so people would watch? Again, I hope he succeeds if he plays, but I think it's bullshit that he's back in the league. But I'm sure soccer moms around the world will be excited because he's Tim Tebow. He's a good-looking guy and he loves Jesus. So it's an easy sell for a lot of people around the world. I don't care about good-looking men, Jesus, or soccer moms. So again, I'm in the minority here. But that's the AFC South. I'm going to be doing one of these every week. So next week, I'm going to be pivoting to the AFC North. So that's Cleveland, Baltimore. Obviously, Cleveland, Baltimore. You got Pittsburgh and the Cincinnati Bengals. So Joe Burrow's second year. You got Baker Mayfield. A lot of good things happening in Cleveland. Baltimore adding to receiving core. Can they get to the next level? Can Lamar improve his throwing? And then where do the Steelers go? Their likely Ben Roethlisberger's last season. Do they make it to the playoffs? Can they compete? They got the Bills week 1, which should be an interesting matchup. But that's where I'll be going next week. But expect one of these every week. It's so much fun to talk about the NFL period, but you get to talk about it in May before anything actually happens, before mini camps start, just to give everybody a little background on what's happening and what to expect as we head into this training camps in July. So I'll be back later this morning with Casey. We'll be talking some NHL. We'll be talking with the NHL playoffs here. It's going to be a lot here and to the point. We'll be covering it all. Try to do as much as I can. Series is Bruins Capitals tomorrow, 8:00. Then there's 2 afternoon games, 3 games Sunday, I believe 3 on Monday, 4 Tuesday. So it's going to get going here. Everybody's favorite division, the North, starts Wednesday with Jets Oilers on Sportsnet and CBC. So we'll see you later this morning. Thank you guys all for checking in this morning. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk soon.